So this is video number 1 of a free mini course I'm putting together on how to leverage Claude Cowork as your own personal AI assistant. Now this mini course is designed for sales reps that are looking to leverage AI to be able to close more customers and generate more predictable revenue. So in today's video, I'm going to walk you through exactly how to set up the Claude desktop app correctly and the 4 different modes that Claude offers and when and how to use them so you can start building out your own AI assistant from day 1 correctly. Now, before we dive into today's video, quick intro to me. My name is Sanjay Ravichandran. I've been in tech go-to-market for over 8 years now, where I've closed deals at some of the largest companies in the world. And currently, I'm focused on building AccuSales, which is a go-to-market engineering firm, which is specializing in helping software companies and specifically revenue teams within software companies be able to leverage AI to be able to really scale their revenue function, be able to generate more predictable pipeline, and close more customers. Now, if you're interested in learning how you can use AI to be able to generate more pipeline, close customers, and also renew and expand them, I post about AI on this channel weekly, so follow me here on YouTube. Okay, so first things first, we're going to download the Claude desktop application. You can come to claude.com/download, and then here you can download it if you're using Mac, and then here you can download it if you're using Windows. It's really important that we download the Claude desktop app because most people are using Claude through the website chat, which is great for, like quick questions or being able to search a vast amount of information. But the challenge with only having Claude through the website is that Claude doesn't have access to any of the files locally saved on your computer. And so if you get the desktop application and use something like Claude Cowork, this is where Claude can actually do real work for you, like updating slides, updating spreadsheets or Word documents, because it has access to those files that are saved on your computer. So it's really important that you download the Claude desktop app and then authenticate. Now, I'm not going to download this because I already have it on my desktop. So I'm going to pull it up in another window and then we'll start actually diving into setting this up. All right, so now that you've downloaded the Claude desktop app, let's actually get it set up. So I've got Claude pulled up on my desktop. So I'm going to walk you through the first couple settings that I recommend implementing to make sure that you can start customizing Claude so you get much better outputs and you get to have a way better experience using Claude. So the first thing I recommend doing is if you go to the bottom left on your name, if you click on it, you can go into the settings. There are a ton of settings here, and I'm sure there's better videos and resources on the internet on how to customize Claude to just be, the perfect employee for you. But there's a few settings that I recommend setting up from day 1 that I feel like will help improve the output of whatever task you give to Claude. So the first thing I do is go to the Claude Cowork tab here. If you click into it, there's 2 things that I want you guys to enable and work on. The first one is Dispatch. So Dispatch is a feature from Claude that allows you to basically give Claude tasks from the Claude mobile application that it can work on your laptop if you're away from your desk. So I like to use this whenever, if I'm on a walk with my dog and my boss calls me asking me for some information. You can actually hit up the Claude mobile app and type it and send it a dispatch task. And Claude can go into Salesforce or Slack or any sort of file on your laptop and be able to pull information to be able to answer questions. Or if you're like, hey, I want you to review this transcript from this meeting I just had because I need to go get some air. Can you take this transcript and generate a follow-up email while I go for a walk? You can use Dispatch on the mobile app to be able to do that. So recommend turning this on. I think this is going to really change, especially if you're a sales rep that's on the go, to be able to continue to do work while you're away from your desk. The second thing on this tab is the global instructions. This is really important to set up, in my opinion, because this allows you to dictate the output that Claude is going to give you, as well as the context that it has on what your goals are for a task. So the reason this is important is, let's say you are a sales rep and your quota is $1 million a year. And if you put that in the global instructions, well, Claude knows that, hey, you have this $1 million quota. How are you tracking against it? If you give a context in the global instructions on these are the buyer personas you're targeting, it knows in every single conversation or task you give it that these are your macro goals that you're trying to solve. So it makes sure that the output is aligned to those macro goals. So for my global instructions, since I'm trying to grow AccuSales as a go-to-market firm, I've given Claude the role of being an expert, CEO and board member with experience in multiple software companies. And I've given it a task of giving me, highly technical, actionable advice for me to reach my business objectives of MRR, obtaining customers, improving net dollar retention, and giving some context on the company and any instructions, anchor every recommendation to those 4 metrics. So Claude is a really great partner to be able to think through ideas, and it's important for you to provide a lot of context. So I would start at the global instructions level so it has that context going into any task or conversation. Now, Once you're done in this Cowork tab, the next tab we're going to go into is the capabilities one. And here there's a couple settings I recommend enabling. These top two, which are search and reference chats, and then generate memory from chat history, I would recommend enabling both of them, because this will allow Claude to be able to reference previous chats or tasks that it's completed in the past and pull that context into maybe a new task or chat that you've opened. This is important because let's say you're working on a deal and you have your first discovery meeting on week 1, and then you don't talk to that customer for 3 weeks, and then you want to prepare for that meeting that's coming up. Well, Claude can actually go and pull the context from that first meeting in week 1 and be able to pull that context so that you're walking into that, meeting, a couple weeks later with as much information and as strong of an opinion as possible. So it's important to be able to allow Claude to be able to reference those previous chats and search through that history. The second thing is, if you do generate memory, this is continuing to customize Claude in a way so it understands what you're focused on, so it can give you the right output based on your overarching goals. So I recommend having these up. If you are moving from like Gemini or ChatGPT or any other AI provider, you can actually import the memory from those other AI providers and bring it into Claude. So you just paste this, you copy and paste this prompt into those different AI models, and then you can paste the output here. And that's a good way to start building memory versus kind of having to build it from scratch. So those are the main ones on this one. And then the last thing is, if this is not enabled already, make sure artifacts, AI-powered artifacts, and inline visualizations are there. Artifacts are really important because when you have Claude focused on doing an actual task, so let's say you have had 5 meetings with a customer, and you're like, okay, take all of these 5 meeting recordings and give me a proposal. You need to have artifacts enabled so Claude can look through those files and then actually generate a PowerPoint presentation or a Word document. And that is an artifact that you need to be able to actually get from the output of Claude's work. So make sure these are all there. These are great because you can actually visualize and see the artifacts in the chat window itself. So make sure these are enabled so that you actually get an output, like an actual artifact from Claude's work. Now, the last thing I recommend setting up is go to the General tab here. A couple things that I've used quite frequently. First one is a voice shortcut. So I'm starting to move away from just typing on Claude to starting to dictate. So being able to do speech to text. So I've got the caps lock key. So I press it and I just kind of brain dump into Claude, and that's my initial prompt. So I recommend, if you haven't tried this, try this out. And then the other two things are keep your computer awake. So if you do run like routine tasks, so I have a lot of people on our sales team that have, like a daily brief that comes in, or they have a daily like email check, or, a couple times a day, Claude will go and look through their inbox to figure out if there's new emails for them to reply to. You need to be able to have your computer awake, because if your computer is locked or asleep, then Claude won't be able to actually execute commands on your computer to be able to go look at your calendar, your Gmail, or your CRM. So keep computer awake. Last thing is enable computer use. This is something that I am a huge fan of, because Claude, it basically can do a lot of the knowledge work on your computer if it's very kind of routine. So a good kind of use case here is if you are in sales and you need to connect with prospects on LinkedIn. It's not a very highly ambiguous or very difficult task to connect with someone or send a connection request. So what computer use does is it allows Claude to have access to your Google Chrome browser. So if you give it a list of 20 people you want to connect with on LinkedIn, it'll actually go take a screenshot of the LinkedIn page and then hit the connection request button and then be able to actually do the work. So the way to think about computer use is Claude can use and do whatever you would be able to do on a desktop or a web page. Claude can do the exact same thing. So I recommend enabling this because I think this is kind of where AI, especially these kind of Cowork, kind of AI agent harnesses are heading towards, is being able to actually do work and control a desktop the same way we would. So have computer use on. I think it's going to be super helpful for you as you go through your sales workflows. All right, now that you've started to customize Claude to your liking, let's talk about the 4 different modes within the Claude desktop app that you're probably going to use day in, day out. I'm going to talk way more in depth about all these modes in the later videos of this mini course, but I do want to touch on what they are right now and then how and when to use them. so that when we do dive into them deeper in actual workflows in the later videos, it's a lot more, you already have the foundational knowledge. So the first one I want to talk about is Claude Chat. This is the one that people are most familiar with. This is what people are using already on, the website, the Claude website. So I usually use the Claude Chat window whenever I have a quick question or a point in time question. So an example would be if I'm on a meeting with a prospect and they, throw a technical term that I'm not familiar with, or they, bring up a competitor that I'm not familiar with. I usually come into the Claude Chat window and then start asking questions about it. So for this, one thing I would recommend doing is I would recommend making sure that you're using the smaller models. So for everyday tasks, I usually use the Sonnet model for all like my chat conversations. So Sonnet with Medium has proven to be really good for me, both from a usage and response time perspective. So I might ask a question like, what is a GPU? And then, let's say I didn't know what that was. Someone might, I might just put it in the chat window, and then Claude would use its training data or search the internet to be able to give me a response. So this is the chat window. This is what I think most people who have ever interacted with AI are very familiar and comfortable with. Now let's actually dive into what is Claude Cowork. So in order to switch between the different Claude modes, up here you can go between chat, Claude Cowork, and then Claude Code is right here. So Claude Cowork is actually where I spend the bulk of my time on the Claude desktop application. So here I would recommend using the kind of frontier model, so Opus 4.8, because you really want Claude to be able to do deep, high quality work for you. And so here, whenever you're using Claude Cowork, the thing that I like to always think about is chat is being able to go to a coworker and ask them a question. But Claude Cowork is if you went to a coworker and actually asked them to do a task for you. So that's the mental model to have. So if you just want a response to a question, go to chat. If you want an actual like work done, go to Claude Cowork or even Claude Code if you want, code to be generated. So here I can come in and say, I want a one-page PDF on what a GPU is. And so what Claude is going to be able to do is take this prompt. It'll probably ask me a couple questions, but it's actually going through some skill files that I have. It's going to use tools on how to actually construct a PDF, and it's going to go through this entire workflow end to end, and it's going to output a PDF for me that I can store on my desktop, that I can use in sales presentations or even internal enablement. So let's actually see this go through the workflow and see what it outputs. So here's the PDF that Claude created. So it's a one-page PDF like we asked on what is a GPU. If you actually come up here, we can actually save it off to our Google Drive. We can open it up on our desktop to see it in preview. But this is Claude actually taking a prompt and then actually giving us an artifact. So this is why it's important for us to have that artifact setting enabled within our settings pane. So this is for when you need a coworker to be able to do a task for you. That's the mental model that I want to give you guys. Is chat is you go and ask someone a question and you get a response and that's done. Claude Cowork is when you go to a coworker and actually give them a task and they need to give you or deliver something to you. Now the third mode is Claude Code. Now we're not going to dive super deep into Claude Code in this mini course because I want this course to be focused primarily on knowledge work that is outside of code generation and software engineering and AI engineering. This is primarily, or Claude Code is primarily for people that want to generate code and build applications or build AI agents. The one thing that I will say though is if you are in sales or marketing, Claude Code is actually really great if you want to be able to do things like motion graphics or animate your slides or presentations. So something that I've been doing for my YouTube videos is I'll use Claude Design or I'll create some static images and I'll feed them into Claude Code and use some libraries like hyperframes to be able to actually animate it. So it gives a little bit of uniqueness and liveliness to presentations and some graphics. So that's a very common use case, but mainly the people that are using Claude Code are engineers and people that are actually building agents or software applications. So the fourth and final mode that you're probably going to be using in the Claude desktop app is going to be something called projects. So how you come to your projects are you go to the chat mode, and then here if you click into projects, you'll see all the projects you have saved, and then you can click into them to start working on a project workflow. Now the way to think about projects is if you have a workflow that you do that is extremely structured and it's very sequential, projects are a great way to be able to save how you want Claude to actually go through and execute that workflow. So for example, I have a AccuSales case study generator. I know exactly the type of tone, what I want Claude to generate, and how I want it to structure the case study as well. So I can give Claude those instructions right here. so that it is able to take an input that I give it, and then it follows my writing standards, it follows my output format, and then it gives me, you know, a PDF version, a blog post version, and all of this. So this is really great is if you have, you know, a very common workflow they might run on a weekly basis that you're like, hey, this doesn't change a whole lot, and I know what I need to input into Claude, or input into whatever that workflow is. So for example, for this case study one, I had 2 testimonials that came from interviews that I did with clients. And so I took the raw transcripts of that and uploaded it into Claude, and then gave it instructions on what to output. And it went through that workflow exactly, you know, the same 2 times to create 2 different case studies. This is really great if you know what you want, like the workflow is very gated and very sequential. You can save it in a project so you don't have to keep repeating yourself every time you need to execute the workflow within Claude. Okay, so this concludes video 1 on how to download and set up Claude correctly. Now in video 2, we're going to dive into how to connect Claude to some of the tools that you use day in, day out. So your CRM, your Gmail, your calendar, all the things that you need to be able to use to be a very efficient sales rep. How do we give Claude access to those tools so it can be your sales co-pilot and really help drive and make you way more efficient? So I'll see you guys in video 2.